In our headlines on this Friday afternoon, March 10th, President Yoon Suk-yeol will be in Tokyo on March 16th and the 17th for a summit with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida on a host of bilateral matters ranging from security to the economy. Meanwhile, North Korea engages in yet another short-range ballistic missile test late Thursday, just 2 days after a warning of war should attempts be made to shoot down its missile tests. And Team Korea faces Japan in its second match of the 2023 World Baseball Classic over in Tokyo at 7 p.m. local time, following a stunning defeat to Australia a day earlier. We start at the top office with news that President Yoon Suk-yeol will indeed be traveling to neighboring Japan late next week for a summit with his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida. Our presidential office correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports.
President Yoon Suk-yeol will be in Tokyo next Thursday and Friday to meet with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, the first top-level visit between the two countries in 12 years. While the exact details have not been confirmed, Yoon and Kishida are expected to discuss ways to overcome the two countries' trade spat and bolster military intel sharing to deter North Korea's nuclear and missile threat. Other possible topics are increasing economic and people-to-people exchanges, with a potential meeting of business leaders. First Lady Kim Gun-hee will join Yoon on his trip and hold a fellowship event with the Japanese PM's wife, Yuko Kishida. In a statement on Thursday, the top office said the visit resumes the top-level diplomacy after a pause of 12 years, and it will be an important milestone in the improvement and development of the bilateral relationship. The official announcement comes just 3 days after Seoul proposed compensating Korean victims of Japan's forced labor through private, voluntary funding rather than seeking reparations from Japanese firms. According to NHK, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida told reporters late Thursday that Tokyo appreciates Seoul's announcement of its solution to the wartime labor woe, adding he is taking Yoon's visit as a chance to bolster bilateral relations. Meanwhile, the trip to Japan was announced less than 24 hours after the top office said Yoon had been invited to the U.S. for a state visit in late April. Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo have been emphasizing the importance of the trilateral cooperation amid North Korea's increased provocations in the region. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And speaking about North Korea, just days after a warning against any action aimed at obstructing its missile launches, Pyongyang on Thursday engaged in yet another short-range ballistic missile test with Kim Jong-un reportedly on site. Our defense correspondent Kim Hyun-sung has details.
North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un supervised artillery training on Thursday, according to North Korea's state news agency Korean Central News Agency on Friday. Kim visited the Hwasong artillery units on the western front lines to give hands-on guidance. He reportedly said that they must grow and maintain their power to overwhelmingly counteract and suppress the enemy's war preparations. It's possible that he's referring to the Seoul-Washington joint military exercises, as the allies from next week will hold their biggest drill in years, dubbed Freedom Shield. Kim reportedly also took his daughter Kim Ju-ae to the artillery training. She's already appeared by her father's side during several state events this year. The news agency's report follows North Korea's missile firing on Thursday. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said on Thursday that at around 6:20 p.m. North Korea fired a short-range ballistic missile into the waters west of the Korean peninsula. The South Korean military is also looking into the possibility of North Korea firing multiple projectiles that day. And from the newly released photo from North Korea, it looks like at least 6 artillery vehicles fired projectiles. It's also noteworthy that North Korea chose to fire off to the west coast rather than the east. It's the first time in 4 months that the North has fired a short-range ballistic into the West Sea, as the East Coast is their usual choice for missile firings. This latest provocation also marks their 4th confirmed missile firing this year. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
And in related news, the U.S. State Department has strongly condemned North Korea's latest short-range ballistic missile test. During a press briefing following Thursday's test, State Department Press Secretary Ned Price warned that North Korea would face greater consequences should it refuse to refrain from such shows of military might. He added U.S. hopes for a change on the Korean peninsula through dialogue and diplomacy with North Korea. On the economic front, findings show Korea's current account racked up a record deficit in January amid dramatic declines in semiconductor exports. Our finance correspondent Arirang has the numbers.
South Korea's current account saw an all-time high deficit in January. Preliminary data released by the Bank of Korea on Friday shows that the country posted a current account deficit of over $4.5 billion, the highest figure since relevant data was first compiled in 1980. The current account was back in the red again in January following a surplus the previous month. This was largely driven by a record-high deficit for goods due to sluggish exports. The goods account recorded its biggest ever deficit at more than $7.4 billion, marking the fourth consecutive month in the red. Compared to the same period a year earlier, it dropped by $9 billion. Exports dropped almost 15% on year, making it 5 months in a row for on-year decline. With the global economic slowdown, exports for chips dropped 43.4% and steel products declined 24%. Imports, on the other hand, increased 1.1% on year, backed by consumer goods like cars and crops. Meanwhile, the deficit in the service account, which tracks earnings and spending on overseas trips and transport, came to around $3.2 billion in January. With eased COVID-19 measures, the travel balance tripled to $1.4 billion from a year ago. The Bank of Korea says this is expected to improve in February with more inbound Chinese travelers.
We saw a more than 100% increase in Chinese travelers in February. And as China resumes issuing short-term visas, South Korea lifting PCR tests for travelers from China, and the two countries to increase flights to the pre-pandemic levels, more foreign travelers are expected.
He added the average spending of Chinese travelers is higher than other countries, which may help narrow the deficit. The official also explained that the Bank of Korea said the current account balance as a percentage of GDP is expected to come in at around 1.5% this year. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, President Yoon Suk-yeol was in Ulsan earlier on Thursday to partake in a groundbreaking ceremony that puts into motion a substantial investment into a single industry here in South Korea by Saudi Arabia. Our trade correspondent Shin Ha-young explains.
South Korea-based refiner S-Oil has begun construction of its Shaheen project. A groundbreaking ceremony for the $7 billion project took place on Thursday in the southeastern city of Ulsan. S-Oil finalized the project in November last year when the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, visited Seoul. It aims to build a steam cracking facility and other units to produce up to 3.2 million tons of petrochemical products a year. When the Shaheen project is completed, it is expected to play an important role in diversifying the company's petroleum refining business by expanding its portfolio in petrochemicals from 12% to over 25%. The project has investment from oil giant Saudi Aramco, the largest shareholder of S-Oil, marking the largest foreign investment project for a single industry in South Korea. During the groundbreaking ceremony on Thursday, President Yoon Suk-yeol said that the project is a key achievement of economic diplomacy between South Korea and Saudi Arabia, pledging to provide a better environment in South Korea for foreign investment firms.
앞으로도 정부는 외국인 투자 기업들이 한국에서 마음껏 경영 활동을 할 수 있도록 세계 최고의 환경을 만들기 위해 최선을 다할 것입니다. 글로벌 스탠더드에 맞지 않는 규제는 과감하게 개선하고 대한민국을 세계 최고의 혁신 허브로 만들겠습니다.
Meanwhile, the project is expected to create 17,000 new jobs during the construction stage and an added value to the economy worth about 3 trillion won or over $2 billion. With the construction expected to be completed in 2026, South Korea's exports are forecast to increase by $900 million in the future. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
And Korea and Saudi Arabia have agreed to further boost business ventures. According to Seoul's Ministry of SMEs and Startups, a related deal has been sealed with Saudi Arabia's Ministry of Investment back on Thursday. As part of this deal, the two countries will seek to set up a global business center in the capital, Riyadh, to facilitate Korea's entry into the Saudi Arabian market. The center will also provide office space for Korean SMEs as a base for them to build networks. Over in Tokyo, following a stunning defeat to Australia on Thursday, Team Korea plays Japan later on this Friday in its second match of this year's World Baseball Classic. Our Choi Soo-young covers Korea's prospects.
Thursday's match against Australia was seen as crucial in determining who would reach the quarter-finals. Defeating that game means Team Korea needs a win against Japan to avoid a repeat of the failures of the 2013 and 2017 tournaments. Team Korea takes on Japan at the Tokyo Dome on Friday 7 p.m. Korea time. Official data between Korea and Japan shows that Japan has the upper hand. According to the World Baseball Softball Confederation's world rankings, Japan is top, while Korea is in fourth. Japan is regarded as having one of its strongest squads of all time and is one of the favorites to win this year's WBC along with the United States. The squad includes some major league stars like pitcher and hitter Ohtani Shohei and pitcher Darvish Yu. Japan beat China by 8 runs to 1 in its opening game on Wednesday. Czech Republic and China are the lowest-ranked team in Pool B, so a win against Japan would give Korea a good shot at reaching the quarter-finals. If Team Korea loses, it will be relying on either China or Czech Republic to beat Australia to give Korea any chance of finishing second. After the rival match against Japan, Team Korea plays Czech Republic on Saturday at midday Korea time. Team Korea's final group game is against China on Monday. But realistically, the game against Japan is now Team Korea's best shot of a place in the last 8. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, in China, Xi Jinping has gained an unprecedented third term as president. During the annual National People's Congress on this Friday, delegates unanimously voted to keep Xi Jinping in office for another 5 years, making him the longest-serving head of state in the country's history. The vote was largely seen as a formality since the 69-year-old had already been confirmed as chief of the ruling Chinese Communist Party last October. This comes as the Congress back in 2018 changed the law to remove the 2-term limit on the presidency. Also on the international front, Moscow has mounted yet another massive aerial strike targeting Ukrainian cities, claiming that the assault comes in response to an alleged border attack by Kyiv. Our Lee Sing-jae has the latest.
Black smoke billows from the early morning sky in Kyiv, where air raid warnings have been blaring all night. Residential buildings and everything in sight have been destroyed. This comes as a wave of more than 80 Russian missiles struck cities across Ukraine, including the capital, the Black Sea port of Odessa, and Kharkiv, killing at least 6 civilians. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is still occupied by Russian forces, temporarily lost power amid Thursday's massive airstrike, with several other regions throughout the country also left without electricity. According to Moscow, the airstrike is in response to the border incursion last week that Moscow has blamed on Kyiv.
In response to terrorist acts in the Bryansk region on March 2nd, organized by Kyiv, the Russian armed forces have dealt a massive retaliatory strike.
The Kremlin says it used high-precision long-range air, sea, and land-based weapons, including the Kinzhal hypersonic missile system, to hit Ukrainian military infrastructure, military-industrial complex enterprises, as well as energy facilities that provide them. Meanwhile, the UN has called on Russia to extend the Black Sea grains export deal, with negotiations set to take place in Geneva next Monday. While the Russian government confirmed the meeting, Russia's top diplomat Sergei Lavrov said Thursday that it would be quite complicated for Russia to renew the deal. Lavrov says the deal, which has been renewed once before, was being half fulfilled due to Western sanctions blocking the export of Russian fertilizers, which are also covered under the agreement. The agreement must be renewed by March 18th, with the UN and Ukraine hoping to get a deal in place in order to ease the global food crisis. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
In the U.S., the Biden administration is seeking a record size of military spending for next year to better counter China and Russia. According to its budget proposal released on Thursday, the administration is requesting for $842 billion for the Defense Department, a 3.2% increase from this year. The budget hopes to, quote, outcompete China and proposes putting $9.1 billion into the Pacific Deterrence Initiative, aimed at protecting its allies and defending U.S. interests in the region. The funds will also be used to modernize America's nuclear deterrent capabilities, support Ukrainian forces, and counter Russian cyber threats. This military spending will be part of a $6.8 trillion budget proposal that's focused on reducing the deficit and raising taxes on the rich. The government here has shared its latest 5-year welfare program for the country's disabled. Under the fresh framework is a plan for a 24-hour care service for those in need. Our Ishihu has more.
By the year 2026, the disabled in South Korea will have the option to pick and choose the types of welfare services they'd like to receive depending on their need. That's according to the comprehensive policy plans for the disabled announced on Thursday by the South Korean government. At a meeting led by Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, the specifics of the plans covering the next 5 years were explained by South Korea's Organization of Policy Coordination Committee for Persons with Disabilities. The plan aims to improve the quality of life of the disabled by supporting 8 different areas of their lives. The core areas for support include welfare, education, and culture and arts. Whereas until now, disability benefits in the form of services or stipends were predetermined by factors such as health conditions or income, in the coming years the system will change so that individuals can choose the types of benefits to a certain degree. For example, the disabled could use their stipends for purchasing support equipment or remodeling their personal vehicles to make them more accessible. This April, the pilot launch for the urgent 24-hour care program will take place in 17 cities and provinces around the country. A maximum of week-long care will be available for those with developmental disabilities in the absence of their caretakers. The government will also support disabled artist groups and create platforms for artwork sales. Meanwhile, the comprehensive policy plans for the disabled have been developed every 5 years since 1998. The plans announced Thursday are the 6th of their kind thus far. Lee Si-hu, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In Israel, a gunman has been killed while carrying out what Israeli officials are calling a terrorist attack. At least 3 people were shot and wounded, with 1 in critical condition during the attack in the capital, Tel Aviv, on Thursday evening local time. The gunman was identified as a 23-year-old Palestinian man with links to militant group Hamas. According to reports, the attacker was shot dead by Israeli security forces after he opened fire in the crowded Dizengoff Street, a street known for its restaurants and markets. The shooting occurred just a few hours after 3 Palestinians were killed in a shootout with Israeli troops in the West Bank. The past year has been marked by a surge in violent conflict in the region. Moving on to Nigeria, at least 6 people have been killed and several injured after a train crashed into a public bus in the city of Lagos on Thursday local time. All of those who died were bus passengers, and at least 80 people were rescued from the bus wreckage. According to local officials, the crash occurred when the bus driver transporting government staff to work tried to outrun a train signal. Accidents from drivers not following traffic rules are common in the country. This in spite of newly introduced penalties for traffic violations. Taking a look at Latvia now, where cars confiscated from drunk drivers are being donated to Ukraine to aid its war effort. The first consignment of cars started their journey to the Ukrainian border on Wednesday local time. The move comes after Latvia changed a law allowing the government to confiscate vehicles from drivers with alcohol levels 3 times the legal limit and above. But with limited space at car impounds, the state decided to donate the cars to Ukraine instead of auctioning them. The cars are being transported by a non-profit called Twitter Convoy and will be given to Ukrainian hospitals and the military. With a small population of some 1.9 million people, Latvia records about 3,500 drunk driving cases per year. And finally, the French women's national football team has sacked its manager just 4 months before the World Cup. Corinne Diacre's sacking was announced by the French Football Federation on Thursday local time over what it called irreversible problems. It comes amid a series of recent resignations from the national team by high-profile footballers, including captain Wendy Renard. Players have criticized Diacre's management, but the former manager says she's been targeted as part of a smear campaign. The Women's World Cup will be jointly hosted by New Zealand and Australia and will kick off at Eden Park in Auckland on July 20th. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. The warmest day of the season has arrived today, with highs to reach early summer-like levels. Seoul seeing highs jumping about 10 degrees higher than yesterday, which was unexpectedly murky and breezy all day. Meanwhile, those in the south will notice highs going slightly higher than yesterday. Meanwhile, dry air in the east of Gangwon-do and most of southeast regions showed no sign of easing up, with a dry advisory remaining in place. West of central regions in Jeju are dealing with high levels of fine dust on this pleasant spring day. So let's keep a face mask that can filter dust handy today. Temperatures are rising fast after a chilly morning under sunny skies, so please do dress accordingly. It's easy to catch a cold around this time. Then a nationwide mix of rain and snow on Sunday will put the brakes on unusually warm temperatures. A puffer jacket is needed for Monday's morning commute, going down to -2 degrees Celsius here in the capital. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions. And those are the headlines at this hour, but do stay with us for our panel session coming up right after this break. See you soon.